I don't know what to do about this. I've mentioned it to you many, many times. I've probably bored you senseless with my own concerns about it. But the way in which our newspapers, yawn, set the agenda, the conversational agenda, is simply a fact of life. For my generation, possibly not for yours, or you may have a rather better palette, if you like, of influence. I probably turn first now to Substacks and blogs, as we used to call them, to which I subscribe. I should probably make a little list of the ones that I actually pay to access in case you want to follow my example. One of them is incredibly funny. That's the one that Henry Morris writes. I subscribe to Ian Dunt's Substack. I subscribe to David Aronovich, the former Times columnist's Substack. I subscribe to the Père et Fils, the father and son Substack that is done by Sam Friedman and his father Lawrence. And I subscribe to a few more as well. And partly because I get all the newspapers provided for me when I come into work, so I can cast my net a little wider. There aren't many who I turn to with a genuine sense. By now I'm talking about the newspapers, the ones I turn to with a lovely sense of trepidation and expectation are mostly the bloggers and the Substackers. The same is probably true for you. There aren't many newspaper columnists left to whom I turn with a sense of trepidation and expectation, as in I'm going to be illuminated or challenged or entertained. That's not true. Most Daily Mail columnists entertain me enormously, but just not intentionally so. And I wrestle daily, as you know, with the what's the word that I want? With the imbalance between influence and impact. The way that these newspapers still set the conversational agenda. Sky News, BBC, Channel 4, ITV, all of us look at the newspapers to get an idea of what we should be talking about. And there's no other way of doing it, sadly. Even I can't do it here. I can't launch a topic at 10 o'clock in the morning that I am introducing you to. I try occasionally, but hardly ever can I actually introduce you to a tale and have an interesting phone-in about it, because things need a little bit of time to percolate. They need a little bit of time to ferment, to brew, before we're ready to have a bit of a ding-dong about it or have a frank exchange of views. I'm kind of flirting with that today, although it's not my idea that I'm going to invite you to comment on. It's the idea of one of the columnists to whom I still happily turn with a degree of trepidation and expectation. It's not always justified, but more often than not, Daniel, now Lord Finkelstein, writing in the Times, is somebody who, it's almost enough to make you nostalgic for the days when you could disagree politically with somebody about almost everything, but find them really engaging and elucidating, find them really challenging and interesting. It's kind of the polar opposite of where social media has taken us, certainly where Twitter has taken us, where we all, well, I don't know quite what the leftish echo chamber on Twitter looks like anymore because I haven't been there for a year. But if you were to find it, then you are increasingly unlikely to be persuaded by anybody from outside it. Newspapers still allow us sometimes to have a little look at what somebody else is thinking in a way that we find really interesting and challenging, but don't necessarily end up agreeing with. And it is to Brexit that Daniel Finkelstein turns your attention this morning in ways that I was not expecting to see. There may be a yet in that sentence, but I don't know, to be honest with you. I do know that the winds of change are wafting over us. That's not a very pleasant that's not a very pleasant figure of speech. I don't think that's probably why it's never caught on. The winds of change are wafting over us. It sounds like a poem by E.J. Thribb, aged 17 3/4. The winds of change are wafting over us this morning because 2 or 3 things have happened. And I say 2 or 3 because it's possible that one of them is actually the same story, but coming from 2 different areas. Everywhere you look, the obvious conclusion is being drawn. People got quite excited at the weekend because the Daily Telegraph, a newspaper whose comment pages never invite excitement, trepidation or expectation, except for whatever absolutely bonkers bills they're going to be serving up on their comment pages today. But even a stop clock is right twice a day. And there was quite a lot of excitement at the weekend over a Daily Telegraph columnist writing under the headline, "Brexit has been an unmitigated economic failure." We can chalk that up there with "the Pope is a Catholic and bears sha-la-la-la-la-la-la in the woods." Statements of fact so utterly irrefutable that you wonder why they have to be made at all. But of course, the Daily Telegraph readers, these are marmalade droppers. These are spluttering indignation prompters, even though the facts are irrefutable. And it was Jeremy Warner, so you shouldn't necessarily see it as proof of a massive sea change, because he's been fairly solid and fairly sensible on this issue from the very beginning. But he points out that Brexit is, like Banquo's ghost, the uninvited guest at the table. Everywhere you look, it is a major reason for why things are bad. And if it's not the reason for why they're bad, it's the reason for why they are worse than they should be. And he rightly points out that only Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader, wants to talk about it. That at least was the case when he wrote this article on November the 29th. It has changed a little bit subsequently, as we will discuss in just a moment. Only 2 references to Brexit in the entire 197-page economic and fiscal outlook that the OBR published to accompany last week's budget. But, as we know, the polling is also pretty persuasive. One of the other stories came out of the United States, the National Bureau of Economic Research, a very august and uniformly respected organisation that found Brexit has reduced UK GDP by 6% to 8%, which is far more than previous estimates. Something that you won't be seeing in your Brexit supporting media, whether it's broadcast or print anytime soon, is the simple fact that Project Fear was not extreme enough. What they liked to call Project Fear actually underestimated the things that you should have been fearing as a consequence of that ludicrous vote. Project Fear did not go far enough, which you are unlikely to see reported anywhere except here. I say that quite a lot. It's a little bit self-aggrandising and not entirely true. There are other people who are banging this particular drum, but I don't know how many of them you come into contact with on a regular, let alone a daily basis. So the National Bureau of Economic Research looks at the numbers, the facts, the stats, and finds that after 10 years, the predictions were a little bit too generous. 5 years, they got more or less right, but 10 years, things are even worse than previously feared. Investment down between 12 to 18%. Employment down by between 3 and 4%. Productivity down by between 3 and 4%. There have been, writes Jeremy Warner, in the Daily Telegraph, of all places, few more devastating assessments than this. Another one, a veteran of Tufton Street, writing in the Times newspaper under the headline, "We Brexiteers must acknowledge the costs of leaving Europe." And somebody who I'm pretty sure used to earn a mysterious crust from the so-called Institute of Economic Affairs, describes himself as being part of the small band of economists for Brexit. A small band indeed. I think it was 2 triangles and a trumpet. But nonetheless, of course, on every television programme that the BBC made, you had to get one of these clowns to sit in opposition to the people who knew what they were talking about and have subsequently been proved right. So I'm not minded to say better late than never to these people, or indeed to say well done for admitting that you're wrong. I'm still, I don't know, psychologically speaking, I'm still not there yet. Contempt for the con men, compassion for the con. So what do you do with a repenting con man? What do you do with somebody who was telling you to vote for it and is now saying, well, we must acknowledge that it was all a bloody disaster? Or the costs of leaving Europe. I don't care about the costs. I got my sovereignty back. Just please don't ask me to describe what it is, what I got back, or what the word sovereignty actually means. So that's 2. And then I think the research that I saw coming out of Stanford, as far as I can tell, it's probably based on the research that was coming out of the aforementioned august bureau. So that's why I said I wasn't sure if it was 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 stories. But there is, of course, another one. The official estimate has now doubled Brexit's hit to the UK economy. This is Bloomberg reporting that the impact has done twice as much damage to the UK economy than estimated by official forecasts. That is a group of experts that includes a senior Bank of England economist. So everywhere you turn, that they are absorbing this Bureau of Economic Research, which is the one that the Bank of England economist Philip Bunn contributed to. You've got former economists for Brexit, brackets, snigger, close brackets. You've got Daily Telegraph columnists. You've got Ed Davey. Latterly, this very week, you've got Keir Starmer finally talking about it, finally seeming set to weaponise Brexit in the context of reminding everybody what an idiot Nigel Farage is, which goodness knows people seem to still need reminding of. And Starmer, you can tell that things are changing because the Daily Mail is writing articles under the headline, "More Brexit betrayal fears as EU minister is promoted. Starmer signals closer ties with EU" is another headline, after a speech in which he sought to put relations with Brussels at the heart of its campaign. It was in the City of London on Monday night that he denounced Britain's departure from the European Union as an utterly reckless template for foreign policy and criticised the wild promises of those who had campaigned to leave in 2016. We should probably have a little listen to a bit of that, I think, which we will endeavour to do before the hour is out. And so there it is, culminating this morning in a very well thought out and well argued column from a Conservative peer, one of the masterminds, for want of a better word, behind David Cameron and George Osborne's political project, writing that it is the logical step for Labour to campaign on a platform of rejoining the single market. The political and economic case, he argues, is overwhelming. The headline, and the headline doesn't always marry completely, of course, with what follows, but the headline, logical step for Labour is to reverse Brexit, is not just an advice, but also a prediction. At the next election, Labour will campaign to overturn Brexit. The only thing that might foil this prediction is the party leadership's ability to defy overwhelming logic. And I think I agree with every single syllable. I think I do. And you know what happens when I think something? I ask you what you think, open to the possibility that I will shortly change my mind. So I think that I agree with every single syllable of this. But I want to know what you think. The argument is irresistible. The plan, the project, the entire thing has been a disaster. Anybody pretending that it hasn't been a disaster is either lying or deluding themselves with lines akin to, there is a brilliant Brexit, it just goes to a different school. Or that bloke I thought was brilliant, Boris Johnson, it's all his fault that it went wrong. The sovereignty that I sleep with every night is satisfying me on a level that I never imagined possible, so I don't care about the fact that employment has gone down, productivity has gone down, investment has gone down, everything has gone down as a direct consequence of doing this. Nobody can argue effectively that all of our problems are caused by Brexit, but my goodness me, every single problem we've got has been magnified and exacerbated by the idiocy of that vote in 2016 and its subsequent implementation even. Britain is completely broken. Let's do nothing about it. That was how Finkelstein chose to satirise the Labour Party's position before the election. And now Brexit is completely broken. Let's do nothing about it is the reprise. So Starmer has nibbled at the edges of the need to reduce friction in trading with the rest of the continent. We've heard that song before. I think we even heard it from Rishi Sunak. But the idea that the time has come to actually tear the plaster off is one that I find absolutely fascinating. I know all of the arguments about the reluctance of the European Union to do anything by way of rapprochement or reuniting while we remain a basket case of a country. You've got Farage leading in the polls. You're not really going to be able to persuade at this point in time members of the European Union that they should stomach the expense, the toxicity, the energy of welcoming us back with open arms when there's a chance that another idiot will come along and drag us back out again at the next election, at a subsequent election. But that's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking about what would happen in the event of us trying to rejoin the single market, a return to the single market, which would be a reversal of Brexit in all but name, and it would be doable. I'm asking whether or not you think Labour should campaign on a promise to overturn Brexit and rejoin the single market. Okay? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Is this rather splendid columnist? I know that there'll be things you're about to send me that are proof that he holds some opinions that I find repellent, but I'm sure I hold some opinions that he finds repellent. Is it actually time for Labour to tear off the plaster and heal the suppurating wound that is Brexit? And reasons that things you might want to consider. If I don't think I necessarily need to tell you this, but just in case I do, the tanks would be parked upon Labour's lawn immediately. I'm minded to suggest that doesn't matter. They're going to park tanks on Labour's lawn, whatever happens. A senior member of the OBR yesterday told MPs that Rachel Reeves didn't mislead anybody. A bit at odds with the narrative of the first 2 days of this week, but of course people who've been shouting liar, liar, liar at Rachel Reeves today are going to be pretending to be concerned about her schoolgirl chess career, without mentioning that the Select Committee yesterday heard evidence from the OBR which specifically and directly denied that she'd misled anybody about anything. More on that later in Missed Information. So fear of what the right-wing media would do, of course, is a thing, but should it be a big enough thing to do what Daniel Finkelstein describes this morning as indulging the Labour Party leadership's ability to defy overwhelming logic? Is there a cogent argument against Labour trying to reverse it? The Daily Mail will use the word betrayal. It will probably go further. It will move into language and rhetoric reminiscent of Joseph Goebbels. I don't use those words lightly, by the way, but that's what they did last time when they went after High Court judges, when they went after academic freedom, when they went after parliamentary democracy. 3 headlines I'll remind you of, because these are reasons why you might think it's too soon for Labour. Enemies of the people, to describe judges. A headline that Joseph Goebbels would have been proud of, but that Paul Dacre wrote. You've got our Remainer universities to describe academic freedom. A headline that various propagandists throughout history would have been proud of, but Paul Dacre wrote. And then you've got not enemies of the people, then you've got crush the saboteurs. Crush the saboteurs, a headline describing what should, in quotes, be done to elected parliamentarians voting according to the facts and their conscience. Crush the saboteurs, a front-page headline that Joseph Goebbels would have been proud of, but which Paul Dacre wrote. So that's where the Daily Mail goes in the event of Keir Starmer trying to get the country back to where it needs to be. Obviously needs to be. Is that enough to make you wonder whether he should press pause?